We get this question all the time. How do you take these dense articles, all this complex data, and boil it down into a clear 5-minute explainer? Well, today you're getting a peek behind the curtain. This is our blueprint, the exact process we use to build clarity from what often starts as chaos.
Yeah, this is the question. This is what drives everything we do here. Because, look, anyone can just list off a bunch of facts. The real magic, the real challenge, is to weave those facts into a story, something that grabs you, makes sense, and actually sticks with you long after you're done watching.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to walk through the 4 big stages of our process, from the very first strategic thoughts to the final structure. This is the framework that helps us make sure every single one of these is as clear and impactful as possible.
All right, let's start at the very beginning. Before we even think about writing a single word of a script or designing a slide, everything, and I mean everything, kicks off with one fundamental question. Why?
These are the absolute first things we have to nail down. What are we trying to achieve here? Is the goal to demystify a super complex topic, or are we breaking down the finer points of a new policy? And just as critical, who are we talking to? Are you an expert in this field, or are you hearing about this for the very first time? The answers to these questions shape our tone, our focus. Really, they set the foundation for everything that comes next.
Okay, so once we know our why and our who, we get to move on to the really creative part of the process, finding the story. Because honestly, we believe that information without some kind of narrative is just, well, it's just noise. And this right here, this is basically our motto. It's not our job to just throw a bunch of facts on the screen from a source. Our real job is to dig in, find the story hidden inside all that information, and then weave it all together into something that's easy to follow and, hopefully, pretty hard to forget.
So how do we do that? Well, we have this toolkit with 4 main storytelling structures. And which one we pick depends completely on what the source material gives us. For example, if a source lays out a big challenge and then talks about how it was fixed, we're going to go with a problem/solution story. If it's all about debunking a common belief, well, that's a perfect fit for a myth-busting format.
Let's just zoom in on these 2 for a second. The problem-solution structure is fantastic for topics like new technology or big policy debates. It immediately creates stakes, And myth-busting is just awesome for grabbing your attention right away because it starts by challenging something you might already believe and then backs it up with evidence.
So, we've got our goal. We've got our story framework. Now we get tactical. It's time to actually build the argument, and that means putting the information in order for maximum impact. How do we arrange every little piece so it creates a flow that builds momentum and makes sense?
We often use this little technique we call the 1-2 punch, especially to open a section. First, you start with a question that really makes you think. Then, you immediately follow it up with a shocking statistic or a really powerful quote. Just like that, bam, you immediately get why this topic is so important.
And this idea, it applies to everything, even something as basic as a definition. See, it's easy to just state what something is, but our approach is to define it and then immediately explain why it's important, why you should actually care about it. That's the leap from just giving information to actually building understanding.
Ultimately, putting the slides in order is kind of like composing music. Each slide is like a single note, and our job is to arrange them to create a rhythm, a flow that feels natural, builds on what came before, and just carries you effortlessly from the beginning to the end of the argument.
Okay, and that brings us to the final, but still super important piece of the blueprint. It's a decision you actually saw us make right at the start of this explainer, the agenda slide. The question is, do we use one or do we just jump right in?
We have a pretty simple rule of thumb for this. If a topic is really complex, with maybe 4 or more distinct parts, an agenda is great. It acts like a helpful roadmap for you, the viewer. But if the story is shorter, more straightforward, we'll often skip it because getting straight to a powerful hook is more important. It's all about what best serves the story.
And that's it. That's our blueprint. From that very first question we ask ourselves to the final slide you see on screen, every single step is a deliberate choice. It's all designed with one single goal in mind: absolute clarity.
So, now that you've seen how the sausage is made, so to speak, the question is, what should we point this blueprint at next? What complex, messy, or just plain fascinating topic do you think is ready for this process? Let us know. Thanks for tuning in.